You're watching The Experience Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Welcome to another episode of I Must Ask You a Question with Jen King, James Hake, and Kyle's actually joining us this afternoon, the man behind the scenes. Kyle, thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, normally I'm making snarky comments in the chat, but today it's like Miss Jen's not quite here yet, neither is Michael or anybody else. So I'm like, I'll come on and we'll get started at least.
And again, why don't you refresh everybody? You also own a comic shop.
I owned a comic book shop for 13 years.
Okay. What was it called? I forgot what it was.
Well, it was Sean's Anime and Comics for the first 10, and the Nexus 419 for the last 3. First 10 years, I had a partner named Sean, and when he got out, I got tired of being asked if I was Sean, so we changed the name. And then we went exclusively to conventions when the pandemic started. Of course, then conventions stopped being a thing for like a really long time.
Yep.
So we are online and conventions only at this point. But
gotcha. And you're one of the CBSN sellers, of course, on Comic Book Shopping Network. And
well, I stopped doing that when I started running the Experience. So it's
really just full time.
When I do shows, it's on the Experience now.
Gotcha. Very cool. Well, again, the perspective of this show is supposed to be from a publisher and a comic retailer, and I love asking because you have a different aspect. I mean, you were brick and mortar, you went to online, and I know because of the pandemic, it was pretty substantial how you had to shift your business model. I mean, we did the same thing as a publisher where we started going to direct to the retailers. Quite honestly, the ones that were still in. Also, we too sell on the different live auction areas, Facebook, Instagram, whatnot, etc. And so like typically when you do sell on the Experience, what are your big go-to sales right now? Like what seems to be selling the most?
So the thing that is wildly popular right now, and it's what's interesting with my job, right, is that while I don't every day go and pull books and sell books, I work with someone every day who does.
Yeah.
Be it Jen, be it the gang from Comic Collectibles, be it Nancy McCann from Comics Unlimited in Cleveland, Tennessee, be it Henri Compen, be it we've got some new shows coming in, our sales shows. Every day I'm talking to somebody who's making sales online. And interestingly enough, we're seeing a trend, at least in my estimation, that is more into the non-traditional comic books.
Really?
In terms of you're seeing very little of your superheroes. You're seeing very little of what has been the bread and butter for the industry for years, and more of a transition to what was the bread and butter for the industry before the whole Comics Code Authority thing. So horror, graphic violence, absurdist violence in horror. You look at books like Survival Street from Vault, which was the Muppets if they were the A-team on a murder spree, like absurd violence. Books like like a lot of the stuff that Scout has put out has been on that kind of cutting edge cusp.
Well, Murder Hobo for us. That's a huge one. Or Mr. Easter, which is a huge hit right now.
I haven't read my copy of Mr. Easter yet. It's one of the few books in my haven't read pile.
It's so fun.
So I'm very excited. I love Kit, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, Kit is amazing. He's such a talent.
Murder Hobo is a perfect example, right? These things that for years weren't even allowed to be published are what we're trending towards. So horror, violence, unique perspectives on story. There's a book this week that I'm just going to call Once Upon a Time, but it's actually like the title is like 35 words. It's Once Upon a Time, issue 1, in the time of something, the place at the place where the thing happened. Like, it's such a long title, but it's a unique post-apocalyptic story. And there's so much of that happening that to have a unique take is way more popular.
Oh, yeah. Who does that one? That sounds interesting.
I don't even remember at this point. Boom?
Boom? Okay.
Yeah. But like that's one that is big. But then this week, Frank Miller Presents.
Yeah.
Is like 2/3 of the needle. The Return of Ronin and then Ancient Enemies is has been a huge thing that we've seen people talking about and leaning into. So it's that whole what is old is new again kind of concept in that regard. But also hey, we've got this new take on this thing that we did in 1983. It's 40 years old almost. How do we we're going to put a new thing on it. Let's go. And people are loving it. So
that's kind of what, I mean, just my reading tastes have gone that way. Like I just finally finished Miracle Man. I had always gotten to a certain point and then stopped and then started over to read. Like I probably read the first like 6 issues, probably like 10 times. And then I stopped because, life got in the way. The other one that I highly recommended from Jim and Richard when they came down a few weeks ago was Nexus, the Dark Horse. And they're like, buy the magazine first.
My favorite character.
So cool, man. Like
I read my store, The Nexus.
Really? Because of that?
Yeah, so after that character. And then I'm like, okay, how do I make it a thing? Just slap your zip code on it. It'll be fine.
Yeah, very cool. It's great, man. I'm right at the beginning of it. And of course, there's so much content on it. So I'm just starting the colored version now. So I'm getting some of these older runs of books that, it's a great, helps me sleep. That sounds weird, but if I read before I go to bed, it's one of these things that is just incredible about after I get so tired and then I'm like, I'm out and it's awesome. So I've been doing that recently, which has been great. But, a couple from our end, the sales aspect of it, a couple things that I've seen that trend down, which is pretty crazy just through our Whatnot and our web store sales are graded books. Graded books don't seem to be getting the dollars that they were before, and metal covers. I think metal covers might have jumped the shark because everybody is doing metal covers now. So I feel those are trending down. What has been trending up though is individual comics, like retailer incentives have been selling very, very well. I'm talking about 1 in 10s, 1 in 25s, 1 in 50s, and sets have been going kind of crazy too, which to me, I feel like is actually healthier for the comic market, right? Because no one's going to really read a metal cover and they absolutely cannot read a CGC book. So everyone's goal as a writer, as a publisher, as a comic shop is you really want people to read comics. Yes, the art is gorgeous. My wall is covered with CGC graded books, but you can only display them, right? You can't read them. So
right. And I think in a recession, which is a word I don't like to say, because I feel like it, I'd rather call it an economic bagel or something. But
you're afraid you're going to summon it or something?
Yeah, I really do feel like it's Candyman or whatever. That if I have $100 to spend, I can buy 1 slab or I can buy 3 trades.
Yeah.
And I'm going to buy 3 trades because I could spend a lot more time with 3 trades. I was just in an independent bookstore here in town last weekend, and they had the original printings of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Sandman trades.
Nice.
And Jen will tell you, I already have those. But for my $100, I will own a second copy because now I have a copy to loan. I could do that, or I could buy 1 slab, and a slab's going to sit in a box or sit on my shelf.
Yeah.
And now I can introduce other people to Sandman. I think sets is an interesting thing because it's people buying individual books looking for a trade.
Yep.
Right. I think trades are more and more and more going to be a thing that they're foregoing buying individual issues to buy a trade, or they're going to forego buying individual issues as they come out and then buy them all at once.
Yep.
right? So I'm going to get all 12 issues of a miniseries or all 8 issues of a miniseries in one shot rather than buy them every 2 weeks for 16 weeks.
I mean, that brings on a very interesting topic that I'd love to get your guys' input. And I've talked to Jen a little bit about this in the past, probably about, it's probably 4 years now. Scout did an interesting, we called it an imprint, but it's basically a way of doing a book. We call it nonstop, where we come out with the first issue and then shortly thereafter we come out with a full trade. The thought concept is first I did kind of develop this when I looked at myself going to all these conventions selling Solar Flare, which is why I got into comics in general, was to produce that book. And I would sell a ton of number ones or sets and then eventually trades at the time. And people would always buy that one, to test the story. And then they'd want the either complete story or that's it. They're buying it for collectability purposes for that issue 1. Do you feel that, I'm looking at from a publisher's aspect, and those numbers go down. I hear from the retailers, they're like, we need more ongoing series. But looking at the numbers, they're not really supporting said series to make them ongoing, especially with creator-owned comics when, the creators, us creators, are paying for it to be done. Even if it's not fully creator-owned, meaning it's like one of the bigger independent comic companies that actually pay page rates, they even have more on the line. Do you guys see, I know this is a long-winded question, but do you see that changing to being where it's just graphic novels or it's doing this nonstop? And the reason why I say the nonstop, you take a book, Forever Maps is a perfect example. It's been optioned for a feature film. It's being written right now by the 2 main screenwriters who did the Cloverfield movies. Mm-hmm. And we did that nonstop. It was one of our first. And when it was announced, issue number 1 just went crazy. And the trade, we sold out. We're actually going to a second printing for our Simon & Schuster release in early next year. But you take a book that just had a graphic novel and it gets optioned, the graphic novel doesn't really appreciate in price. So that was like the whole kind of concept of doing it, because you still have, and if we look at it from a publisher standpoint, issue 1s are profitable across the board. It's 2s maybe, and then 3, 4, 5, you're usually losing money. Initially, you have to sell through them, but it's tough to sell a 3, 4, 5 of a sequential book when they don't have 1, 2, or 3. And just like you were saying earlier, Kyle, they either wait until the whole thing comes out and buy it in a set, which is why we created these things called title boxes, or you essentially you wait for the trade. Like, how many times have you guys as shop owners, especially independent companies, like, I can't get 1 or 2 anymore, I'm just going to kind of wait for the trade. So what do you guys think about that whole long-winded explanation question concept?
Kyle's burning to answer it.
Well, you said something in there that I think is key.
Okay.
You talked about value appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
Trades don't appreciate in value. They, or at least not financial value. They appreciate in sentimental value,
100%,
and enjoyment value. Right. I have trades that Metal Shark Bro is an example from Scout that I've probably read the trade 4 times.
Love that. Love to hear that. Yeah.
But that trade isn't worth anything on a secondary market or on the market. Like, it's worth.
I don't get that, by the way. I don't know why collectors
price, but
yeah,
it's in that sense. It's not like I can put it in a short box and say, "Hey, this is a key issue." It's a trade. So I think the way the numbers bear themselves out has to be broken down further.
Mm-hmm.
And as a finance guy, you can probably have a better concept of this, but you have to look at each buyer type and what each buyer type's mentality is in terms of how they pick what they buy.
Mm-hmm.
And then look at who's going to buy a book and determine what that answer is, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are books that certainly don't make sense to come out as single issues.
Mm-hmm.
A single issue doesn't tell enough of the story to make it justify coming out. And we read books like that every week where it's like, why is this an issue? Like, you couldn't combine issues 2 and 3 and make one issue and make it a 3-part series or something.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain, so figuring out who's going to buy the series and how they're going to buy the series, I think is going to be as dictative as to paper shortage, like paper availability, right? Was for a while there. It's, well, if only people who buy manga are going to buy the series, then we need to just put it out in a trade and skip single issues altogether. Whereas if only people who buy Captain America are going to buy this series, then we need to put out a single issues and a trade later. And I think that's the answer. Like, I have series that I just go straight to the trade, and I have series that if I don't get the book every 2 weeks, I get itchy.
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on, the buying habits of the customer, right?
And I think you named it right at the beginning, man. Like stuff like horror and outlandish stuff that can work as sequential issues. But you take a book that's very serious. I use Yasmin as an example for us that I think is award winning. It has done so well in a different market, which is the bookstore market, than it did on the direct market. It just doesn't have that superhero or zombie or dragon or vampire in it, that really kind of resonates on that the direct market. So like you look at that and it's weird, and it's a guessing game. I mean, especially you mentioned Captain America, obviously, many years of history and lore that give you a better indication of whether that's worth it or not. But that's why, I mean, look at all the restarts that Marvel does. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I was just reminiscing. I was reading Secret Wars, the very first Secret Wars. I got it in a trade, and just remembering, like, how they used to do a little asterisk, and it's like, as found in Amazing Spider-Man number 258. And you're just like, man, where are we ever going to see those numbers again? Like number 258. I know Marvel kind of jumps back and does legacy numbering pretty much only when it's about to hit a milestone, like a, 800 or a 850, and then they essentially reboot it. So I don't know what the right answer is there. Jen, like, what do you think? I know I've talked to you initially when we first came up with the concept.
What I've kind of seen recently is the successes I've seen in books that are not just single shot straight to trade, are ones like, I'll just use Good Boy as an example. Like they did little really short runs, right? It was like 3 issues for the first series, 4 issues for the second series, and I still have no idea whether it's supposed to be 3 or 4 for the final series. But those seem to, for at least for our pull boxes, stay really steady. Like people don't buy number 1 and then skip out or say they don't want any more of the other ones. So I don't know if it's the length of the series is the determining factor about whether people will stick through with it, or if it's like their personal connection to in this case, probably since those creators are very hands-on, it might be the personal touch. They feel like they know them because of how much they're on talking to their fan base, or man, it's like I like the nonstop things for you guys, but there have been other companies that do that same kind of setup, and it does not work for them.
Really?
Yeah. For like Wave Blue World, that was the way they launched their product, and I couldn't get people to buy either the single issue or the trade, which is a shame because the books were really great.
Yeah, they have some really good books.
I think too, timing, right? Like, so you guys with nonstop, it's a book comes out, and then what is it? A month later, the trade comes out, or
I mean, that the idea was a order cycle, right? But
right
now, I mean, things have kind of changed in that whole aspect because we didn't have FOC then. So that was part of the reason why we wanted to do it. And on top of that, now we have Simon & Schuster distribution. And people might not know this, but Simon & Schuster distribution, it's a whole nother animal compared to the direct market. The direct market is you essentially do a page count, the creators, a picture of the cover, and then a brief paragraph. That's all you have to do as a publisher when you submit those. And it's about a 4-month leeway. Simon & Schuster is 9 months. And they like the whole thing completed. The amount of data that you have to input, comparisons, not just financial comparisons, but like key selling points. You put author bios from everybody from the artist to the colorist to the letterer to the editor, videos, and the book buyers, they read the entire book. So it behooves you as a publisher to have it done before you actually submit it to to make it available for sale. So now looking at that and then coming from a, dollars and cents thing, the direct market doesn't really order trades. That was one of the biggest things that I didn't know as a creator. I started off on Kickstarter, and my whole goal was the cash cow seemed to be the trade paperback, right? That's where a lot of Kickstarters would do extremely well. Little did I know when I got on this end, the direct market, it's improved now that our distribution has improved with both Diamond and Lunar, but you don't get the numbers that you're expecting as a publisher. And I'm sure a lot of the smaller independent publishers would agree with me is it's not big at all. And it was really, as a creator, like quite surprising, because I thought that was like, man, if we just get to the trade, it really takes having bookstore distribution and to make it worth financially, it's feasible. We're not tying up a lot of cash or cash flow into creating these trades, because, you know, when you're printing 2,000 trades, your cost per unit goes to, you know, $5. But when you're only printing like 250 trades, the cost per unit is like $9. And if you're getting paid, you know, $9.20 from from the distributor, it's a bit of it's not much margin there. It was more of a loss leader. So my long-winded explanation, I'm sorry guys, I'm pretty long-winded today, but is the nonstop is now more of a 9-month leadway, just because we want to maximize it, where we have the direct market and the Simon & Schuster market, where they're ordering sometimes thousands of trades. But the worry from a publisher point of view is those are fully returnable at any time. So we have to have other channels to, you know, so many companies have been bankrupted because of that.
Well, and that's what I was going to say about Wave Blue World. Their problem is they were launching with a single issue, and then they were like, okay, come over and follow us on this social media channel, and we'll give you updates and show you pages and stuff. And then 6, 8, 12 months later, here's the trade.
Yeah.
And it was, I think the timing matters, right? If I can buy a single issue and before I've forgotten about the single issue, buy the trade, I'm more likely to do that. Whereas if I've got to wait a year and make sure I'm following this random social media account that they set up specifically for this creator on this thing, I'm not going to do that.
You know how we switch that? How we answered that problem, Kyle, is we re-solicit the number one the same month we do the trade.
Right.
Whether it's the same issues, because we overprint on those in particular, because we're thinking it as a brochure for the trade, right?
Right.
Or we do a second printing, and that kind of gets it back in the news.
Right. And that's why I think nonstop works. It's because you're able to cut down on that disconnect. Whereas I don't think other people have done that well. So
yeah, I think that the thing that I've heard from so this is a retailer hearing from publishers, and you can tell me certainly if it's true for Scout also, James, that if the stores that were, you know, operating brick and mortars, if all of them that are registered as buying stores, if all of them would just buy 2 of each trade, it would be economically great.
100%. 100, 1,000, even if they...
Seems like such a low number to meet, right? Now I just ordered 2 of everything because I knew that. I was like, if that's all it took, I got it.
If they buy 1, if all the stores in existence just bought 1, it's economically viable. So 2, you know, cut that in half and it makes sense. I agree. It's just, in trades, I mean, they're evergreen. I get, that's the other thing I look at. It's evergreen. You know, I always used this example, was Mindbender. One of my favorite series. Jim Pruitt, our publisher, wrote it. Just such a great book, beautiful art. My favorite issue out of the 6 issues was number 3, because there's just a couple scenes in there where the kid has like a mind of an 8-year-old, and he wakes up with all these powers like many years later, and he's an adult. And it reminds me of Tom Hanks from Big. And I just think it hits on every cylinder. But, you know, I remember going to the local comic store in town, and all they had, I think at the time, issue 5 was on the stands, and all they had on the shelf was number 3. And I'm like, man, what a tough sell for that comic store. You know, it's just issue 3, unless they absolutely love the art, or there's some kind of like, oh, this is a lower print run and it's been, you know, it's going to be the next TV show or the next movie. That's a tough sell. So the whole other concept is beginning and story, or the whole story. That's evergreen, you know? I don't know. I just fascinating seeing it on this side, not just as a person who's part of a, you know, a growing exponential publishing company like Scout, but also a creator. And it's just mind blowing, this industry, and especially the changes for something that hadn't changed for so many years, as you both have been in the industry. Like, have you ever heard or seen the type of change the comic industry has made in the past two?
No, I
Pretty
mean,
wild, right? Maybe the 90s and the distributor wars, but nothing.
Yeah, I wasn't in the business yet, but I remember that.
Yeah.
Like I remember the end of Capital and going to my little comic shop and them like bemoaning that Diamond was the only option. And then now there's multiple options and they're like, yeah, we only deal with Diamond still.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. If you ever get a chance, there's a couple of articles if you type in the comic distribution wars just to read about it, because it wasn't really like Diamond did anything more savvy at the time. It was kind of like they bet on the right horse. You know,
Mhm.
it really was like more of a happenstance than it was. And you know, I talked to that's where Jim has so much. Our publisher again has so much. He was around then. He was running Caliber. And it caused Caliber to go under. And Caliber was probably at the rate where Scout is. And when they have 7 different publishers, or excuse me, distributors, and all of a sudden they go belly up and they don't pay, and then the publisher can't pay the printer, you see this like, I mean, it was very, very sad. And hopefully, you know, history won't repeat itself.
Right.
You know, with this thing, I think we're a little bit more savvy, and thank God that for the internet, which allows you to do things, and shipping has gone and increased tremendously. Well, I know Kyle has to run here, so we like to actually end everything with a question. So this one is going to be pretty cliche and cheesy, but I just want to ask each one, what do you think? Thanksgiving is tomorrow. What are you guys thankful for? Just one thing in the comic industry. We'll make it comic related. Jen, ladies first.
I'm really thankful right now that like I see so many people in the industry, despite the fact that it seems a scary place right now. It's scary for every industry, honestly, if I'm going to be truthful. That instead of like freaking out and being mean to each other, that people have instead kind of like, how can we help each other? I'm thankful for that.
Nice. What about you, Kyle?
I wasn't prepared for a heavy question.
No,
I was more thinking, okay, he's going to ask what's your favorite Thanksgiving side or something like that. I've been having the mac and cheese versus stuffing debate in my head. For me, the thing I'm most thankful for is that like this is my job.
That's
like
great.
I every day get to talk to people who make, sell, distribute, talk about comics. And that in a time, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when I thought I might not be in the industry anymore, I still am, and that I get to be a part of it every day. So I'm incredibly thankful for that this is what I get to do for my job.
It's awesome. Hey, for me throwing that on you, you answered pretty darn good, both of you. What I'm thankful for, quite honestly, I'm thankful for the staff and the people of Scout. Like, we couldn't, every year I look at the previous year to see, you know, what kind of growth and what kind of movement. And every year for the past, and this is what, the 6th year now I'm saying this, it's unbelievable. And a lot of it is because of the people, the men and women who have helped and believe in what we're trying to do. And of course, our partners, like the experience, like the comic store, like Jen, and it's just incredible. And in a year that's been very, very turbulent, I mean, I'm just thankful for the people who've stuck around and keep doing what we're doing. Cause like you said, we all are kind of living that dream, right? Like, we're in this industry that's pretty darn cool. And I think the positives currently, and I think it's going to remain that way, surely outweigh the negatives. So, well, great. Well, everybody have a happy Thanksgiving. We will see you in December, which is next week. I think that's December 1st. If my math, math is hard. But it'll be next week. And again, have a happy Thanksgiving. Kyle, thanks again for filling in and everything you do. And Jen, of course, thank you so much. And we'll talk to everybody later. Have a great long weekend.